success to me means freedom of time, freedom of money. It's so easy to get fame and influence confused because without influence, you don't have someone's ear. You don't have the trust. I could see that somebody who was on exactly the same level as me was being paid 30% more than me. And they were definitely not 30% better than me. 70% of the women who would come to him would not take a job unless they could meet at least 9 out of 10 criteria.
Today's guest is Nishma Patel Robb, a woman on a mission to close the dream gap and smash the sparkle ceiling. With a 30-year career spanning analog to AI, she scaled Google and YouTube's brands and advised founders. Now through her platform Glittersphere, she's helping women claim their influence, not fame. Bold, funny, and unapologetically herself, Nishma champions the other AI, authentic intelligence. Nishma, thank you so much for being my guest on the Strategic Salary series. It is an honor to have you on the show.
Oh, well, and I think the honour's all mine, to be quite honest, Lucy. What a chuff to be. I mean, I have to say, the name of your show and this whole series and content absolutely gripped me. So I couldn't have said no.
Oh, thank you. Now, Nishma, we're going to jump straight into it. I have a series of questions for you. Your career has been nothing short but fantastic. You've had huge successes at Google. Please take us back to how you broke into the industry and that moment when you knew it's time to pivot outside of Google.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think sometimes, careers can look like a bit of a kind of a show reel. And look, there's no doubt about it. I've had a really wonderful career. I always talk about it as going from analog to AI because I started my career in an analog world, but in a business called Teletext, which was like a Google for Google. And my career has kind of spun to my last corporate job was at Google. And it's funny actually, because when I came into the industry, I always knew I wanted to be I actually wanted to be in advertising and something, journalism initially and then advertising. Journalism, I kind of was like, not really sure it was for me. It felt quite kind of soulless activity. It felt quite lonely. I'd done an internship at a magazine and loved it, but just realized it wasn't for me. Whereas I used to see the people in the sales department, the advertising department, and think, God, they look like they're having much more fun.
Yeah.
So I'd chosen the fun rather than anything else. But I think that sense from since I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a storyteller. It was just, it was my thing. From when I was tiny, I would want to sit and tell people stories. And so much like now, when I came out of university, it was a horrible recession. It was impossible to find a job. There were no jobs. I really feel for the graduates that are coming through at the moment because it's a tough environment. And, none of the schemes, the big marketing graduate schemes, all the bigs like P&G and everything, I couldn't get on them. And, it's really hard at that time because you don't know if it's a talent or if it's a bias or it's just like there's too many people. But I had a bit needs must. I needed the money and I ended up going into a sales career originally. Not many people know, but I actually started my career at Haymarket on Campaign Magazine, selling ads.
Wow.
Yeah, only a very short stint because they paid terribly. And so I moved from there to Teletext. So I didn't even have Teletext on my telly and lied about it in my interview to get the job and was like, I'll work it out. And literally joined as admin girl, rose through the ranks over the 8 years because I'd found a real knack for selling. I think that ability to talk to people and that curiosity that I naturally had really lent itself well to the job. And a lot of hard work and perseverance. And I rose to the top of that business to be managing director of the business at a really young age. And then from there, it was like, various kind of reinventions and pivots. In some respects, always trying to get me closer and closer and closer to what I really wanted to do, which was to be really in the seat of marketing and telling stories and also to be able to do it at scale. So when I joined Google sometime after that, various pivots of agencies and having kids and all that, I arrived at Google straight into the marketing department, which I think was, either genius on them or me. I'm not sure which one. I didn't have a lot of marketing experience before that, but it was a big opportunity. And I initially started on B2B stuff, which is, was the lion's share of really a lot of the work that marketing happened at Google. It was all about how do you get people to use YouTube or Google search or whatever it might be. And it was an absolute playground with all these toys and a huge canvas to do something different. And I went in, actually, as I have been throughout most of my career, incredibly disruptive in a kind of charismatic way. But I went in there and was like, there's so much more we could do. And what about, connecting with emotions and that? And everything from being heavily involved in the way that we led the kind of commercialization of YouTube in the UK, through its kind of adoption, its growth within agencies along with search, and then all the way through to AI. I had this wonderful opportunity to take probably one of the world's most loved brands and biggest brands with the biggest canvas. What you were going to create was going to be seen by everyone, which had a huge sense of responsibility around it, but also a lot of fun with very, very talented people. Which why when I say to people I've left, I was like, what did you do? Not sure my mum and dad are still forgiven me, but anyway, but it was this kind of moment. I'd been there 10 years and I'd hit 50 a couple of years ago. And I had this moment where for me, it was not that I'd fallen out of love with Google, because I hadn't, but I'd almost fallen in love more with this pursuit of something I really wanted to do, which was, since a little girl, I'd wanted to be, when I was a little girl, it was a TV presenter that had evolved. But I knew I had a gift, or my superpower, whether it's a gift, it's a superpower, the things I not only enjoyed, but was good at, was this ability to tell stories, to make a difference, to change things. And I frustratingly had spent a lot of my career, like many people, trying to lobby for change, more equality, more representation in every sense, not just gender, in every sense. And I'd done lots of roles around leading women at Google. I was very lucky to be the president of WACL, which is one of the big communities in our industry, women in advertising. And I just had this yearn to go, I have a sense that if I don't do this, I'm probably going to kick myself. And the thing, it's one of these things, there's no like, ta-da, like it is in the movies. I wanted it to be like,
Yeah.
it wasn't. It's a slow burn. And
Yeah.
I was getting increasingly frustrated in the role I was in, because in some respects, the more senior you go, the less you get to be kind of closer to the making. But also I just found myself in more shuffling of seats rather than them actually doing stuff to have impact. So completely crazily decided to leave and step into the world of being a founder. No experience in doing this at all. It's been one hell of a roller coaster ride for the last year. But I love it, and I think I'm more in alignment than ever before. And all of this comes back to throughout my career, from being that little girl who was dreaming through to now, I've had one very clear, I didn't notice this all the way through, but when I look back, the red thread through my story was this constant need for kind of freedom, and that freedom being attached to equality. So personally, success to me means freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of location. I've always been a rebel. I'm could never been boxed in. I was always a bit of a pirate. I've just
Yeah.
been kind of kid, that employee, in a good way, but disrupt. And but but I think that sense of, actually, I saw the power of that freedom gave to women particularly. And too many women are trapped in their lives or trapped in situations because they don't have freedom, whether that's financial freedom or anything else. And look, the world is kind of showing that tenfold over to us at the moment. So for me, it was around wanting to do something using the skills I had that I enjoyed doing, dedicated to saying, could I make a difference? And I felt like I needed to, also being a mum, and in some respects feeling like I don't want my kids to come in to the same environments that I have and had to put up with for most of my career. I want it to be different. So hence I left and created the Glittersphere, amongst other things.
Nishma, that story is so brave. Many people will resonate with wanting freedom in every aspect of their career, wanting to feel in control, but not many people do something about it. And that could be for a number of reasons, because they just can't. They're in a situation where they're unable to, I don't know, maybe financially unable to make that step. But the fact that you have basically broken those shackles and said, I'm going to do something for myself, is extremely inspirational. So thank you for sharing that story with us. I do
Oh.
have another follow-up question though.
Mm.
Do you get sleepless nights?
I am deep in sleepless nights at the moment. I think that's the thing. And a lot of my content that I share, and I think perhaps part of my, or whether it's success or appeal, is that I have always been very honest. For me, it was, I probably spent a lot of my earlier years of working, having to mask who I was. And I don't mean just people always think it's the obvious thing. Oh,
Mm,
what, you mask your ethnicity or being a woman or whatever else. And I was like, no, being masking me, that I'd like to turn up and wear sequins, that I have a very cheeky wit, that I will challenge things respectfully, but I will challenge things. I'm not one to kind of be acquiesce and just go with it. I will have to, if I see something wrong or I feel like there's a better way to do it, I've not been one to hold back. And actually, unfortunately, too much of our society and the business world doesn't really want you to do that. So, that suppression for me was really suffocating. And it's not just a man to female thing, it's women to women as well. It's like, it's a pervasive thing that I'm very passionate about changing. Because I think we do have to break the shackles. I think shackles is a really good word because there's too many expectations on women. It really is like, you've got to be a certain age. Have you had kids or you haven't had kids? And, oh, you should do this. And even down to career patterns, there's a sense of, oh, you should do that. Now, all of that comes with shit tons of fear. So let me tell you. And I'm very honest about it. Yes, I have sleepless nights. Yes, it's really hard. And a lot of it is the uncertainty. I'm very one of these people to kind of, I'm an optimistic visualizer. So I do this big thing of I choose every day to wake up and be happy and choose to be optimistic. Doesn't matter how things happen. As I was telling you before we got on this, the things that cancelled and the world happens, you just have to kind of face it for what it is. And I think whether it's age or wisdom or attitude, I'm just a big believer of I trust myself now more than I've ever done. So I'm a bit like I'll back myself to believe that I will find a way. And I think when I fears in the sleepless night, sometimes it's around a sense of responsibility. There's a lot of shedding of identities. When I left a big job, like anybody leaves any job really,
Yeah.
had an identity. And sometimes you're just trying to go, well, who am I now? And I think when I release myself of things like, oh, but will people think she's still successful? And you release yourself of ego and realize that, a lot of times people will talk to you because of the job you had, not because of who you are. Very refreshing once you realize that. Um, Painful, but refreshing once you get past all of that. And I think so when I'm having a sleepless night, I also remind myself that I get to do what I want on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning, or when I go, do you know what? I don't want to do anything today, or I'm going to go work from somewhere else. I have created a lot of freedom in my life, and that is going to come at a price at times. But yeah, it's scary. So I don't paint a picture of entrepreneurship being like, ta-da, it's all amazing. I think you've got to be slightly nuts to want to run your own business. I think there's a high degree of there is certain kind of people that can do it and there's certain kind of people not. I'm definitely one.
Thank you for sharing. You really do bet on yourself. I think I can feel it through this podcast. I wouldn't say never, but it's been a long time since I've come across someone that is, you bet on yourself. And I think it's fantastic because you should always bet on yourself. And I've seen you on stage numerous amounts of times and you've said something that stuck with me for a long time. No one's coming to save you. No
No.
one's coming.
Took me a long time to realize that though, because I think I spent so long and like everyone, like this is the other thing you learn is, particularly I think that's the thing that's really important about what you're doing or what I'm trying to do is this sense of um not just visibility and creating that, but actually that sense of, oh, I feel seen. So if I think about it, I spent so much of my career just thinking someone will come along and they'll recognize all the great work I do and I'll reach promoted, I'll get the opportunities. And then the scales fall away, right? Over time. It takes a long time. And it's not always like this. I'm painting the worst of the worst, but there is a degree of even without malice, this happens because there's a lot of pressure on managers sometimes, and are they going to spot everything you're doing? So there's a lot on you to take control of your destiny, whether that's, make sure people know the impact you've had. And I don't mean in a, sharp elbows, braggy, annoying way, just
Yeah.
in a respectful way. Like if no one knows, how can you expect someone to do something about trying to shift you on if you're not clear and precise about, well, what do you want from your career? And so I think that sense of no one's coming it was quite a hard lesson to learn for me when it was, when you say that, you're taking accountability. And I don't think I was taking accountability of the direction of my life. I was in the phase where I was just blaming everyone else. And you almost kind of fall into being a bit more of a victim at that stage because it's like, oh, well, it's that there. And then
Yeah.
no, hold on. I want to take responsibility for my life and be accountable for what happens. And that sense of control is scary at first, but then it's really liberating. So yeah, backing myself, I feel like I've got to. If it doesn't all work out, Lucy, though, please remember I'll be back to you. Right, give us the job, Lucy.
Let's hope not. Let's be optimistic. But thank you for sharing, Nishma. So I ask all guests this question. If you don't currently follow Nishma on LinkedIn, follow her. She posts inspirational content. But I ask every guest, What can't we get from your LinkedIn or your CV?
Um, so I think I am quite vulnerable in my post now. I think I spent such a long time giving probably a more perfected image. I'm much more vulnerable and honest about the stuff I don't know. And I think that's, again, really liberating. I'm a real avid learner. I don't know if people get necessarily, I'm quite a tech geek. I'm not sure that always comes through, but I'm fearless in some ways, so I have shared recently that I've tried to embrace stand-up comedy. I'm trying to DJ, I'm somebody who'll throw myself into the things I love. But I think it's this sense of, the messiness and the noisiness and the curiosity, I think, comes through a little bit, but not always. I think some of it is we have such a sense of polished perfection because of judgment that I think it's sometimes quite hard to kind of go, well, actually, this is who I am. I'm much more comfortable about it now than I ever used to be. But I think probably the key thing is this: I have I have a lightness of spirit, and I do, laugh a lot. I like to tell jokes. I like the fun things in life. But I think sometimes actually that's been a bit of an Achilles heel as well. Or actually, maybe the other way to think about it is actually my superpower is that I have been very often underestimated. And so I think I can walk into the room, and because of the way I look, maybe I don't look as business as someone else. People underestimate my ability. And that can be frustrating, but as I say, it can also be a superpower because it's like, great. It's like being a hustler at a snooker, table. But I think sometimes that frustrates me. And I think that's one of the things that's really hard to convey, which is why video is really good, actually. I think you can bring more personality into that. But I think um, we have a perfected persona and a sense of responsibility. But it's quite hard to see all the layers. And I think for me, my layers definitely live in the vulnerability and the fear and the doubt and the questioning that sometimes is not expected of someone of a certain age, position, experience. And I think that's nonsense because I actually think we all experience it. We just don't talk about it. And I think it's only when you can talk about it is when growth comes. So for me, I embrace it because if I don't, then how am I growing? And I know when I go from curiosity is when I'm at the stage where I'm like figuring things out. But the minute I hit action, it's like another stage. So I think, yeah, maybe some people get all the layers of me with my madcap things, just wearing lots of sequins, doing comedy, trying to DJ, love dancing. I might endlessly embarrass my teenagers, but also have a wonderful, wonderful relationship with them. I learn so much from them. I think I have, I hope it comes across because I think sometimes I worry about, do I come across a bit, I love men. So I'm definitely not an anti-male person. I'm not a radical feminist in that sense. I am a feminist, absolutely. But I also believe in male allies and supporting them. I think sometimes I worry about that kind of tone there. But for me, it's much more around, I'm really passionate about cross-generational, cross-cultural, like the mix of things. You know, I think personally, I think Gen Z got it right. We got it wrong. So, I don't call them the snowflake generation. I'm like, we're the idiots. But I think unless you're kind of really open to things, and I think I'm like this about music, I'm about fashion. I sometimes shock my kids with going, have you heard this? And they're like, what? Where did you hear that from, mum? But I think when you're really like that, that for me is oxygen. Right? That's where I get my inspiration. It's where I get my ideas. It's where I get my creativity. So it's hard to package all of that externally. And I think sometimes you can get like, you're a tech, you're a leader, you're this, you're that. So many labels we give everyone. But the reality is, I'm probably slightly messy, chaotic, vulnerable, curious, like hip hop, dancing, drum and bass, garage kind of girl. Still raving at a defective party. But also can, sit down and talk about neuroscience.
You know what? You've just highlighted, when you were saying that, it brings me back to the LinkedIn headline. You're forced to put yourself in these boxes. And I would probably say over the last 5 years, people have started utilizing multiple headlines, but it's impossible to tell people what you stand for, what you do, where you work. I probably changed my headline 5 times in the last 6 months because I'm
I
like,
do
okay,
as well.
I'm a mum, I'm an advocate. No, I'm a tech leader,
Yeah.
I'm a speaker. It's exhausting, and it's a shame that Lucy just isn't enough. I'm Lucy.
I know, and it should be, shouldn't it? And do you know the other thing actually, and I love that because I almost think, one of my, aspirations for the future is that I have this thought around the fact that we are, we're meant to be human beings, but we're constantly reduced to like human doing. So we ask someone the first question too often, and I still do it, right? And I have to catch myself on and go, please don't ask that question. Because I'll
Mm.
go to someone and go, what do you do? You go to a networking event. Oh, hi, I'm so and so. Well, what do you do? And the what do you do immediately forces, because our brain is wanting to do that as well. But then we're putting them in a box. And really, actually, the question I should be asking is kind of bit like, what's making you happy? What are you thinking about? What are you aiming for? What's the dream? What's the goal? And I think then you get to a totally different layer of a conversation with somebody. But I think you're right. I mean, I've changed my LinkedIn thing multitude of times because I'm always like, you know what I do? Is it good? It probably isn't. But also because it's really hard to be stuck into those boxes. And sometimes I just feel like I don't want to be defined just as a founder or ex Google marketing chief. There's a bit of me, it's like, actually, I want to be perhaps the way I should describe myself is defined by what my ambition is or what my dream is, what my aspiration is. Maybe if that would be enough, I'd be really happy with that. And maybe that's what we should do. Maybe LinkedIn should be changed. Everyone has to write in their profile what their dream is. Like, doesn't matter what their job is.
I would love that. I mean, you remind me of a network. Well, it wasn't a networking event; it was a retreat, and we were forced to leave our titles at the door. And I'm big on this. Any presentation, any meeting that I run, I don't care about your title, but we were asked that we weren't allowed to share what we did. We were all creatives, and in that room, we had to introduce ourselves as an emotion of how we want to make people feel. So mine was, "I'm Lucy. I'm joy and light," and that was what everyone knew me for the last, well, for the I think it was 2 days. And it was so refreshing to know we had execs in the room. We had like heavy hitters in their career, but no one cared because we were all being vulnerable and I'm Lucy, joy and light. And it was just so refreshing to just forget about what we do for 2 days. But it's rare.
One of the things I've reflected on recently, so one of the things I'm very proud of and again, was not an intentional thing. I didn't go into it and go, oh, I'm going to build a network. I don't
Mm.
think we even talked about networking when I was younger in my career. You just like had relationships and you went out and, okay, I've got to get to know this person. But, or even I didn't have to. I just was curious. I liked meeting people and I have some really strong, long, deep relationships with people I met through work environments. But I think the thing is someone said to me recently, like, you've built a really strong network. What do you think what's the kind of secret sauce to it? And I was thinking about it today because you can say all the kind of, obvious things about like, try and be nice and follow up and all that. All those things are very important. But I actually think from when I was really young, I just wasn't phased by title. Because I had this real thing, and I don't know if it's how I overcame my nerves when I was younger, or if it's just like ingrained into me from like a family point of view. Because it was like we are all the same, and I know I can hear my mum's echo in that one. It's like we are all the same. Doesn't matter if you're like here and that. We sleep, dream, poop, whatever, all the same. And I think because I carried that through, it meant that when I spoke to somebody, I didn't think about whether they were senior or more junior or whatever. It was like, they're a person and therefore I'm curious about them. And I think there's a lot to be said for us falling in love with that again and coming away from fear and just going, actually, there's a real joy in meeting people, getting to know them. And I think unfortunately nowadays, sometimes we're a bit more scarred or a bit more hidden behind the screens. We've lost practice of doing it. But when we talk about halcyon days of time before, I think actually the most wonderful things, if I reflect back on how I'd like things to be, would be because there wasn't a phone in your way. So you actually had to talk to somebody. You couldn't go into a room and just go like
Yeah.
this. You had to go in a room and talk to someone or in a queue at the coffee shop or whatever. And I think that is something I feel really passionate about. But I think and I found this with I suppose moving up the ranks is a lot of people talk about it. It's very lonely. It really is. Setting up your business on your own is really lonely. I also, chose to change my situation at home. So I have a high degree of loneliness. And I don't say that in like a pitiful way because it's one of those things that it's really weird because actually I'm constantly surrounded by people, whether it's my kids or my work, or whatever. But you can also feel very lonely. And I think it is our greatest challenge of our generation, of our time, is we have to think about where loneliness is and Maybe we'll just all fall in love with our AI chatbots, and I think I talked about AI chatbot, I talk more than anybody else. Probably something I shouldn't confess to, but
Lishma, thank you for sharing. Now, I'm going to quote you here. You say visibility isn't fame, it's influence, which I think is very powerful. How did that belief shape the way you navigated pay, promo, leadership discussions throughout your career?
yeah. Well, I think first of all, um, it's so easy to get fame and influence confused. So most of us, me included, will have chased fame at points in my life because it's what I thought was like the Holy Grail. It was the thing that was going to propel me forward. And fame, I suppose, in its truest sense, is a sense of popularity. But popularity, you can have millions of followers and or be really popular in a room. And, I say this to my kids when I talk about somebody popular at school. And I go, well, popularity sometimes isn't necessarily respect or trust. Popularity can sometimes come through fear or attachment or whatever it might be. Whereas influence is only really achieved through trust. And you cannot be influential without being trusted, because it's only when you're trusted and you have built that depth of relationship and proof of delivery or whatever it might be, credibility, that then you can have influence. And I think for me that the learning piece, whether it's through promotions or pay rises, was understanding that first trust was really important. I probably always had really great relationships and a high degree of trust. I wasn't necessarily always reliable. And that's me being very honest. Certainly my younger years, my career is, I'm without a doubt ADHD brained. I've got 45 tabs open at all times and I have an optimism of doing everything. And of course, that means at times you're not going to deliver. But trust is only ever built up with the consistency of delivery of against expectations or what I think you are going to do over time. And when you don't, there's like a little chip on that. So I think that was for me a real lesson. So when I was hitting a point where I'm like, hold on, why am I not progressing? I'm doing this, I'm delivering all these things and big numbers and growth. And you realize actually go, have I convinced them that I could be trusted to take this to the next level? And that little shift in my head meant that I was way more focused, laterally in my career. Was like, okay, what do I need to focus on? What do I need to do? And recognizing, particularly I think as you move into leadership or management roles, is everything is about your team and delivery through them and less about you. And that shift becomes really important because you're building trust both ways, both your team and upwards. So for me, influence is really critical to navigating anything, because without influence, you don't have someone's ear, you don't have the trust, you're not going to get the opportunity. And so for me, sometimes, if I think back to my years at Google, one of the things I'm really proud of with the work that I was able to do in that time is because I had built trusted relationships with all of my bosses. And I was able to influence them then on decisions or direction and strategy. It allowed me to kind of do some of, my best work and deliver brilliant results for the business. But we're always needing to influence somebody, right? I think everyone, doesn't matter whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in operations, whatever, there's always a degree that you are going to need to persuade someone or convince someone to do something that will help drive or whatever it might be. And that might be a career, it might be a project, whatever. And having influence because you're trusted, respected, and known and have that credibility is really important. And I think sometimes it's really easy to chase the vanity metrics. In a work environment, it's really easy to go, well, I'm just going to deliver all my numbers and I'm going to smash all that. And I don't really care about how I treat everyone else. I don't care if I've got the best relationships. I'm going to step on everyone's head and get there. Watched it happen so many times. And if you reward that, you're rewarding the wrong behavior and you only expect worse from the team. But it's so easy to reward that, because imagine if you're running a business and you've got this star player who's like delivering and they're like super popular because they're like, yeah, boom, like delivering the numbers. It's easy to kind of go, oh, I don't really want to not promote them because they're bringing all the numbers in. You might have somebody else who, through quiet influence, is actually able to be just as effective in a slightly different way. And so I think building up that sense of credibility. So you've got to put the reps in, do great work. I used to say to people, one of the easier things I think can happen, and we've all done it, I have definitely done it, but I spent a lot of time coaching other people around it, is sometimes when you're so fixated on the promotion, you just forget about doing a great job. And sometimes you just need to do a great job. I think the bit that I add on to that now is you just need to do a great job and make sure somebody knows about it. So I spent years doing just a great job, but not always being a very good storyteller of what I was doing and or the impact of what I was doing. Sorry, never tell the story of what you're doing, but tell the story of the impact you're having. And I think that's the difference is when you're doing that, you're going to be so much more mindful of the relationships you build around you and the credibility, the trust, the depth of like, what are you doing? How can you evolve things? Why should you be able to be that person to do it? Because I think that's ultimately knows, but individuals, when in any job, right, we're all replaceable. We all know that. But there's a reason why you're in that job and you're bringing something of you, something special and that. And I feel like if you don't really focus on that, why could I do this versus anyone else? Doesn't mean I'm better, just bringing my flavor to it. If I don't think about that because I get obsessed with, well, I just want to get promoted and therefore I'm going to play the game and do that stuff, never ends well. So I think I definitely didn't do a very good job of at times of I was very successful in being promoted throughout my career. I think, very strong delivery, great relationships, better at communicating in the latter stages, probably not so much the early stages. I was terrible at negotiating my pay, and that's a huge amount of self-worth problems, like, oh, well, I think, so grateful. And I had a shocker in my early years of my career when I was really smashing it and then found in the old days when you still had a photocopy and before you emailed and really ancient tonight, but no, it wasn't that long. Someone had unfortunately had printed out the salaries and I could see that somebody was exactly the same level as me was being paid 30% more than me. And they were definitely not 30% better than me. If anything, I was probably 30% better than they were. And that floored me. And I think that was the first time where I felt like, wow, this isn't just you've got to fight for what you've got to have. This isn't just going to come to you. It's like fairground, kind of fair play in the playground. It wasn't. So I think that was one of those things that I then learned to say, actually, you are the guardian of what you're going to get. But self-worth, particularly women, we struggle with this. How do we put ourselves for a promotion? How do we ask for it? We want to be perfect before we go for it. I just see it all the time. I still see it. There was a recruiter I spoke to recently. I was on a panel with him for a PR thing. And he said to me, um, something like 70% of the women who would come to him would not take a job unless they could meet at least 9 out of 10 criteria. Whereas he said it was almost like 100% of the men would take a job if they only met 3 out of the 10 things. And he said it was so stark. And I think that's just a level of confidence and value that we just don't have, partly because of external stories that have been told to us and made us feel that way. So yeah, I think learning the skills to negotiate your pay, your position, your value, it all comes down to your value. You've got to know what your value is rather than a sense of entitlement. I hate that. I hate people who come in with a sense of entitlement. I'm like, please don't come in with a sense of entitlement. Male, female, whoever, don't care. With a sense of value. Because when you say to someone, this is a value I bring and this is what I can bring, it's a very different conversation. But I do think that a lot of it is like focus on your delivery and tell your story rather than trying to think you can play the games. It's bollocks. Can't. And sometimes you can't because the system's not going to work for you either. That's also, I say to so many women as well, who I coach and look after and say, they'll tell me their story. And sometimes you have to tell them the brutal truth. Well, I'll go, leave. You are spending your energy on something you will not change. And that's also one of the tough things where you've got to be able to learn when to leave. I've been terrible at that. So I've learned, but certainly my years, I probably left jobs later than I should have done. And I think that's again back to faith and backing yourself. Um, and so I'd love every young woman and everyone I see, all the way through every kind of stage and rank. I'm like constant, which is suppose why I do what I do. I want to build belief and a sense of confidence in women so that they can go out and demand what they should get.
And that is why you're a guest on the Strategic Salary Series. Nishma, you've articulated my purpose beautifully. I want every listener, whether they're a man or a woman, but first women, to fully understand their worth, but have the tools and the confidence to go out there and ask for what they want, secure it, and feel that sense of accomplishment, because I feel like every woman deserves that, to feel accomplished. And it's one of my big beliefs. And again, the purpose for this podcast is to give people the tools and strategies. So thank you for being so detailed. You tell a great story, but your story it's just laced in insights and action. And for any listener who is listening to this podcast, don't just listen to the words, take action. Honestly, just take action. And you mentioned it, it's not easy. I'm not saying that there is a silver bullet that's you're going to take from this podcast, action it tomorrow and your life will change. Sadly, it just doesn't work like that. But consistency, compounding, keep at it. And I'm confident that change will happen because it has to. We can't stay still.
No. And that's what I love what you're doing. Like, I don't think there is enough emphasis on teaching us about, thinking about our salaries and our worth and negotiating it. And I think hand in hand, and there's starting to be better awareness of it, but I would desperately wish it for it to be more, is we have to have a better sense of our finances. Personal finance education is terrible, worse for women, but terrible generally. And you start to realize that there are those that know and those that don't. And those that know understand how to manage money and work it. And I'm not talking about having loads of money. I'm talking about, I've spent most of my career just generally like off and breadlining it. But if I knew now what I knew, if I knew then what I know now, I definitely would approach things slightly differently. And I think this sense of salary and how businesses work, how P&Ls work, how do they think about your salary? How do they calculate your value and the cost? All of those things that we usually want to switch off because Rishi Sunak's telling us we should do A-level maths and really no one gives a shit. Really what we should be doing is teach people the kind of finance that actually helps them in their lives. So like the core finance of understanding how a business is run. I think one of my gifts and I love doing is anything I would ever meet, businesses I meet, people I meet, the first thing I want to do is I need to get in my head, how do they make money? Because once I understand okay, that depends on that does that, it's easier to then go, right, I understand what you need to do to grow. You need to do that if you're negotiating your salary and your position and value in a business. Really understand how does that business work? How does it make money? And therefore, why is it attributing those costs to those people and salaries? Like, what's the value you bring? And then I think also like more externally, so you can put your salary in the context of your life because we're going to live long lives. We're going to have very long careers and you need to think about your careers in kind of phases and stages. Women, particularly, unfortunately, if you choose to have kids, are going to take a hit on your money. And I did when I had my twins. It took me 5 years to get back to what I was earning before I had my twins. So you're hit with those penalties. Now it's getting better because businesses are understanding how we bring people back in and that post maternity leave and paternity leave. But I think there's a sense of like, if we could just step back and do a bit of like financial salary planning, like we do career planning, I think that'd be a real game changer because you'd immediately go in and go, this is my bottom, this is my top, this is what I want at this stage of my life. And if I'm not going to get it, I'm going to have a sense of abundance and what can I go elsewhere? Or I'm going to go, do you know what? I'm just going to button down. I'm happy to take that wage right now, so long as I can get it up here at this stage of my life. And I think it just frees you from this kind of constant fear and anxiety of like, am I doing enough? Am I getting paid enough? Am I safe enough? And all those things.
Thank you for sharing. You're absolutely right. Financial literacy is so important. So I'm extremely privileged that my partner is an independent financial advisor and a financial coach. So I've had him coaching me throughout my entire career on the money side of things. And I'm able to look at a negotiation from a monetary value, but also financially plan what my salary will do to my life and my lifestyle and outgoings, income. And I just think financial literacy for women in particular is such an untapped opportunity. I'm so big on ensuring that I'm just fluent in how to speak money. And I know that's a very strange thing to say, but it's a complete different language.
I mean, I'm way old, and I've only started to develop a better. I'm still not financial literate, not by a long shot. And having read a few books and things, because I was just thinking, hold on a minute, and I feel frustrated that there were definitely so many times in my life. Often, even when I was in the boardroom and there were other women, there were so many times I was often part of at the time, a pairing where we both worked. You don't have the same setup. Your money is spent in different ways. But if you don't understand how to invest, where to save, how to plan longer term, because I'm so glad your partner is a financial advisor because so many people I have met and not great, and they really make you feel horrible about not knowing. It's like I always say to people, it's like going to the dentist when you know you haven't brushed your teeth. You don't want to go, you're scared. So you get scared of seeing a financial advisor. Whereas I think the more we can demystify it and the more we can simplify it and make it digestible for people to go, right, I can understand it. I use a couple of apps. There's one that I think 'cause it's founded by two women as well, but it's called Plum. And it's one of those apps that basically, it teaches you how to invest on stocks and shares and stuff like that. But you can invest micro amounts. So you can set it up so it scrapes your account. So it might take like £3.50 from my account from that month, whatever. It's picking up little bits of money. And then you can also choose to put some money in it. And over time, which is the lovely accelerator, over time you start to see it. And I think I could, we could like get everyone to get to grips with that. I think it takes a bit of a pressure off. Not that you shouldn't be out negotiating a greatest value. Actually, I think you have more self-worth and you have a bit of a safety blanket underneath you, safety step underneath you. But I think it's the sense of actually how do you accelerate what you want to do? You're right. It takes confidence and courage to go off and pursue your ambitions, whether that's in a corporate career or not. But finances is part of that, and that's why I want financial freedom for women. That's why, just like you, I want to make a meaningful difference because it literally changes lives.
Agreed. Thank you, Nishma. Now, you touched on this briefly, but you said you coach women, you coach ambitious women. Now, what is the most common mindset blocker that you come across, and how do you help them navigate through this?
So I think the hardest one is confidence. I hate to say it, it is a sense of that self-worth and confidence. People feel that some of those hurdles are quite hard to overcome. So sometimes it's about literally, how do I unpick my life? I want to go for this career. I want to go for this promotion, that sense of readiness. So irrespective of seniority or experience, confidence is still the most significant thing. And people were surprised by that. Okay, but I speak to people right in the C-suite who are still struggling to go, I want to go for this promotion. I don't know, really know. And I'm like, but of course you are. You like I was the same. You worry and you question these things. So I think that because we've never really had the environment from which to be able to thrive. I have written something today to say, and look, this sounds terribly anti-men, but it's not meant that way. I'd written a post at the weekend about Angela Rayner and my frustrations about not the politics. It wasn't a commentary about politics. It was a commentary about, as a working class woman, she never stood a chance. She was targeted from day one. And I love it, and it took off, right? It's thousands of likes and loads and loads of comments because it really hits a nerve with a lot of people. They see themselves to go, I kind of step into a race that I can't really win even before I get into it. And I love, and I'm slightly jealous of the confidence of a few chaps who step Gary's, the Steve. I don't even know who these people are, right? They're like billion beyond me. I don't even know how they found the post, right? But I love the confidence that they've got, that they don't know me. They don't know any of the people in that conversation. I didn't ask them into my chat and they pop up and tell me that I'm wrong. Now, if I could bottle 10% of that confidence and give it to every woman, we'd be in a very different situation. So I think that's one of the big blockers. I think then the other thing is, as someone who's on the other side of 50, in my 50s now, is for so many of us, we haven't seen that longevity of career. So for most men, there wasn't a time limit. There wasn't like, oh shit, I've got to get it all done. There's see people, look, hey, we've got presidents in their 80s, right? You see long, long careers. For women, it almost felt like if you don't get it all done by a certain time and you've got to go have kids and you come back and you do that, you're off, right? Because who do we see who's older? So the way you plan your career changes because you're squishing it into that time. So when I work with some of these women and go, we get over the confidence thing, I then go, right, stop, stand back, let's plan. You're going to be working for a lot longer. Whether you want to, choose to, whatever, you have this opportunity. We're at 50, I might live to 90. I'm only halfway, a bit more than halfway through. So I think there's a sense of being able to see how they want to evolve it. And then I think the third thing is about options. I think sometimes women feel like if I don't take that job and then that promotion and then I move there and then I've got to go there for 2 years, that is what I distill as the heavy, heavy weight of expectation and narrow set of behaviors we have for women. We have given women about 4 or 5 different bloody routes to go through their life with. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
And I think until we can really free people to go, you can do this with your career, you could go here, you don't have to have kids, you could have kids, whatever, you can have them when you're older, who cares? It shouldn't be a determinant of what you choose to do in your career. And I think until we can really get over that, and so my method of getting over that is I'm trying to tell as many stories of as many women as I can possibly do. Because every time you tell a story of time, you're like, oh, that's a bit like me. I didn't know, they did that. I didn't realize that. Is you start to build what I call nuance. Nuance becomes the mass market. That's what you want to do. You want to start to feel like you're the unusual one, and actually it's more unusual to not be unusual. So I think those are the things, confidence, a sense to be able to kind of do long-term planning, and then an ability to free yourself of the tight stereotypes and expectations that we have around what you should do. What you should do is, I think life and careers is a pursuit of alignment. What you find in your life and your career is actually just get closer and closer to be aligned to your values. And when women are the most unhappiest or frustrated about progression in their career and getting stuck, is it's not just those confidence in the hurdles, it's because they sense a sense of misalignment. So if you're not doing the work that's aligned with your values, you're sitting there going, I can't get promoted because this guy's never going to go up his seat and he gives you that chat and it's not going to happen. Is what will it take to take someone from that and put them somewhere else? And we're only going to be able to do that, you know, the laughable 2% of investment that goes to women, but we can't create more opportunities despite the fact that, women are starting more businesses than anyone else right now. We have to think about where that recruitment is, and childcare and elder parent care, all those things. So I think there's a multitude of opportunities to kind of really change things. But yeah, I think the top 3 are those ones that I hear most commonly.
Thank you for sharing, Nishma. The fact that you've said confidence is the number one main blocker. It seems like such an easy thing to overcome, but it's the hardest thing. It's so deep rooted. It's just, just confidence, overcome it.
I talk about it as visibility, right? So I'm not a confidence coach necessarily, because I think confidence is so complex.
Yeah.
There is so much complexity. There's so much, as you say, you've got to go deep within and understand. So I talk about it as visibility, and visibility, whether it's talking about your personal brand or just like, how do you make sure you're seen and heard and understood? Because actually one of the biggest challenges is confidence keeps you in the shadows. Confidence stops you from putting your hand up. Confidence stops you from going for that role. Confidence stops you from going to ask for that negotiation of a salary. But actually, if you start to learn to build visibility, you almost kind of build a bit of a moat around yourself, because you start to say, this is who I am. I'm confident in who I am, because people are more comfortable to tell a story of what they've done and put themselves out there by going, well, I can tell stories and I know how to do this, once you teach them how to do it. And interestingly, through that, confidence comes. And so that's why I talk so passionately about visibility and being unmissable, because it is visibility that really addresses that piece. Confidence may take you a very, very long time to ever address, and I'm not sure anyone it fully does.
Yeah.
Visibility you can be strategic about and achieve.
Nishma, thank you for being so transparent and vulnerable with me today. You have given insights, actionable insights, which to me makes a difference between telling a story, but really dissecting that story and saying, well, how can I relate to that? I can take what she said there, do this and excel my own career. So thank you so much for being so transparent. Thank you so much for being so insightful. Now, before we finish up, I would like to do the random round.
Okay.
This is very quick fire questions. Ready? Okay. What's your bedtime routine?
Oh my God, it's terrible. Rubbish. I go to bed too late. I'm an absolute potter. I stay up too late. I am quite good with a skincare routine, but I have to say I do get into bed, and I have the ambition of reading a book, but actually what I do is I probably read 2 Instagram posts and fall asleep. So it's a
Okay.
really bad routine.
Thanks for sharing. What's your go-to hot drink?
Oh, I'm a cup of tea girl. Always. English breakfast. Love my cup of tea. I'm not a big tea drinker, but I like a tea in the morning.
Okay. Most used emoji.
Probably the laughing one, actually.
Okay.
Followed closely by the one that's like the wobbly eyes of like,
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I think I'd probably like to, either share things that are witty or express humour.
So, if you had to deliver a TED talk in an hour for 20 minutes, what topic would you choose?
Wow. I would talk about how authenticity and storytelling in an age of disconnection and automation is going to be our savior.
I would log on to that TED talk. Thank you. And final question. If there was one meal that you had to eat for the rest of your life, what would that one meal be?
Oh my God, I love rice. Just love it. And in particular, there's like an Indian style of fried rice. It's just really simple and probably not very good for you because it's just basically carbs and some onion and a bit of yogurt on the side. But that would be, yeah, I think that was like, it's the kind of death row chat, isn't it? If you're on death row, what would your
Yeah.
meal be? Like, that's it. Everyone's a bit like, that's a bit shit. You could have picked something really lovely. I'm like, well, that and black cod, but
Okay. Fair. Nice meal. Is there a name for this dish? The rice that you
Um,
mentioned.
the Gujarati name is Vogela but although it's
Okay.
just fried rice.
Thank you for sharing. Nishma, you have been fantastic. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for being you. And thank you for making me laugh. This has been a serious, happy, funny, insightful, motivational chat all in one. So, again, thank you for joining me on the Strategic Salary series.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Lucy. I've loved it.
If this podcast made you think differently or questioned the way you approach a conversation or the way you navigate your strategy moving forward, please do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and share. Your support will help others discover this podcast and keep the conversation going.